The bustling cafe in Atlanta was a hive of activity, filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the chatter of customers. Megan, a young waitress with dreams of becoming a musician, moved between tables with practiced ease. Her blonde hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and her green apron bore the cafe's logo. As she worked, she found herself caught up in conversation with her coworkers. And if you love your family and want to hear more incredible stories like this one, subscribe to our channel. "Did you see that guy at table 7? One of her colleagues, Sarah, whispered as they passed each other. "He's been nursing that same cup of coffee for 2 hours now." Megan glanced over at the table in question. "Maybe he's a struggling writer or something," she suggested with a shrug. "Or maybe he's just cheap," Sarah replied with a laugh. Megan chuckled along with her, but there was a hint of discomfort in her expression. She didn't like to judge customers, but it was easy to get caught up in the gossip and banter of her co-workers. As she refilled coffee cups and cleared tables, Megan couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversations from other staff members. They were making jokes about customers' appearances, accents, and behaviors. While some of the comments were harmless observations, others had a sharper edge to them, bordering on cruel. Megan found herself laughing along at times, but each chuckle left her feeling slightly uneasy. She knew it wasn't right to mock people, especially those who were paying customers, but she also didn't want to be seen as stuck-up or humorless by her colleagues. The cafe door chimed, signaling the arrival of a new customer. Megan looked up to see a woman entering. She carried herself with an air of confidence, her head held high as she surveyed the room. The woman was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her dark skin contrasting beautifully with the crisp white of her shirt. As the woman made her way to an empty table, Megan felt a shift in the atmosphere. Her colleagues exchanged glances, and she could sense a tension building. Sarah sidled up to her, speaking in a low voice. "That's your table, Meg," she said, nodding towards the new arrival. "But you know, you don't have to rush over there. Maybe she'll get the hint and leave." Megan frowned, confused by Sarah's words. "What do you mean?" Sarah rolled her eyes. "Come on, you know how they are. Always complaining, never tipping well. It's not worth the hassle." The implication in Sarah's words hit Megan like a slap. She knew it was wrong, knew that judging someone based on their race was the definition of prejudice. But as she looked around at her coworkers, she saw expectant faces. They were waiting to see what she would do, and the pressure was palpable. Megan hesitated, her hand clutching her notepad tightly. She should go over there, take the woman's order, treat her like any other customer. That's what was right. But the weight of her colleagues' expectations bore down on her, and she found herself frozen in place. The woman at the table looked up, making eye contact with Megan. There was a question in her gaze, a silent request for service. Megan felt her cheeks flush with shame, but still, she didn't move. Seconds ticked by, stretching into minutes. The tension in the air grew thick and heavy. Other customers began to notice the woman sitting alone, unattended. Whispers started to circulate, and Megan could feel disapproving glances being cast in her direction. Finally, unable to bear the pressure any longer, Megan made a decision. With a deep breath, she turned away from the table, pretending to be busy with other tasks. She could feel the woman's eyes on her back, could sense the hurt and indignation radiating from that corner of the cafe. As Megan busied herself with menial tasks, pointedly avoiding that section of the restaurant, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made a terrible mistake. The air in the cafe seemed to have grown heavy, charged with an unspoken tension that affected everyone present. The cafe's atmosphere remained tense as Aisha, the woman who had been ignored, gracefully rose from her seat. Her face was a mask of composure, but her eyes betrayed a mix of disappointment and resolve. Without a word, she gathered her belongings and strode towards the exit, her heels clicking rhythmically on the tiled floor. As she reached the door, Aisha paused for a moment, her gaze sweeping across the cafe. Her eyes briefly met Megan's, and in that instant, Megan felt a surge of shame so powerful it nearly took her breath away. But before Megan could react, Aisha was gone, the bell above the door chiming softly in her wake. The cafe seemed to collectively exhale once Aisha left. Megan's colleagues exchanged looks of relief and subtle nods of approval. But Megan couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamentally wrong had just occurred. She tried to busy herself with work, but her movements were mechanical, her mind replaying the incident over and over. Meanwhile, Aisha walked briskly down the street, her outward calm belying the turmoil within. She had faced discrimination before, but this incident felt different. Perhaps it was the blatant nature of it, or maybe it was the fact that it happened in her husband's business. Whatever the reason, Aisha knew she couldn't let this pass without action. As soon as she was in her car, Aisha pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number. After a few rings, a deep, warm voice answered. "Robert speaking." "Hey, it's me," Aisha said, her voice steady despite her inner turbulence. "We need to talk about what just happened at your cafe on 5th Street. Robert, the owner of the cafe chain and Aisha's husband, listened intently as she recounted her experience. His initial shock quickly gave way to a mixture of anger and determination. "I can't believe this happened in one of our cafes," Robert said, his voice tight with emotion. "This goes against everything we stand for. I promise you, I'll address this immediately." Aisha appreciated her husband's swift response, but she also knew that this issue ran deeper than a single incident. "I know you will, but Robert, this isn't just about me or this one cafe. We need to look at the bigger picture here." They talked for a while longer, discussing potential ways to address not just this incident, but the underlying attitudes that allowed it to happen. By the time they hung up, both felt a renewed sense of purpose. The next morning, Robert arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. He watched as his employees trickled in, noting their surprised expressions at seeing him there. Once everyone had arrived, he called them all together for an impromptu meeting. "I've gathered you all here because something unacceptable happened in this cafe yesterday," Robert began, his voice firm but not unkind. "A customer was ignored and made to feel unwelcome because of the color of her skin." A hush fell over the group. Megan felt her heart racing, her palms growing sweaty as she realized the full implications of her actions. Robert continued, "I want to make one thing absolutely clear. Discrimination of any kind will not be tolerated in our cafes. Every customer who walks through that door deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their race, gender, or any other factor." He went on to outline the cafe's policies on customer service and equal treatment, emphasizing the importance of creating a welcoming environment for all. As he spoke, Robert could see a range of reactions from his staff. Some looked ashamed, others defiant, and a few, like Megan, seemed to be grappling with a mix of emotions. "I know that biases can be deeply ingrained," Robert acknowledged, his tone softening slightly. "We all have prejudices that we may not even be aware of, but it's our responsibility to recognize these biases and actively work to overcome them." He announced that the cafe would be implementing a new training program focused on diversity and inclusion. "This isn't just about avoiding negative behavior," he explained. "It's about fostering a truly inclusive environment where everyone feels valued and respected." As the meeting drew to a close, Robert made eye contact with each of his employees. "I believe in second chances," he said, "but I also believe in accountability. Let this be a turning point for all of us. We can and must do better." With that, he dismissed the group, leaving them to reflect on his words as they prepared to open the cafe for the day. Megan lingered behind, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She knew she had a lot to think about, and even more to learn. As the staff dispersed to begin their daily tasks, Megan remained rooted to the spot, her mind reeling from Robert's words. She mechanically went through the motions of opening the cafe, her thoughts a jumble of confusion, shame, and defensiveness. Part of her wanted to believe that she wasn't racist, that her actions the day before had been a momentary lapse in judgment rather than a reflection of deeply held prejudices. But as she replayed the incident in her mind, she couldn't deny the ugliness of what had transpired. Throughout her shift, Megan found herself hyper-aware of her interactions with customers. She noticed things she had never paid attention to before. The subtle ways she changed her tone or body language, depending on who she was serving. It was unsettling to realize how ingrained these behaviors were. As she wiped down tables and refilled salt shakers, snippets of conversation from her coworkers drifted her way. Some seemed genuinely affected by Robert's speech, discussing ways they could be more inclusive. Others grumbled about political correctness and overreaction. Megan wasn't sure where she stood in all of this, but she knew she couldn't simply brush off what had happened. Meanwhile, across town, Aisha sat in her home office, staring thoughtfully out the window. The events of the previous day had stirred something in her, a determination to turn this negative experience into something positive. She reached for her phone and dialed a number. "Hello, Jasmine. It's Aisha. I need your help with something important." Jasmine, a longtime friend and community organizer, listened intently as Aisha explained what had happened at the cafe and her desire to address the larger issue of racial discrimination in their community. "What you're proposing isn't easy," Jasmine cautioned after Aisha finished speaking. "Changing deeply held beliefs takes time and effort. Are you sure you want to take this on?" Aisha's response was immediate and firm. "I have to. If not me, then who? We can't keep waiting for someone else to fix these problems." Over the next few hours, Aisha and Jasmine brainstormed ideas. They discussed workshops, community forums, and partnerships with local schools and businesses. As they talked, a plan began to take shape, a comprehensive program aimed at raising awareness about racial discrimination and promoting empathy and understanding. "We need to make this relatable," Aisha mused. "It's easy for people to dismiss statistics or abstract concepts. We need to share real stories, create opportunities for genuine connection." Jasmine nodded in agreement. "And we need to involve people from all backgrounds. This can't just be seen as a minority issue. It affects everyone in the community." As the sun began to set, Aisha felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it head-on. This wasn't just about one incident in a cafe anymore. It was about creating lasting change in her community. The next day, Aisha began reaching out to local organizations. She contacted civil rights groups, educational institutions, and community centers. Many were eager to get involved, seeing the value in a coordinated effort to address racial discrimination. She also spoke with Robert about involving the cafe chain in the initiative. He was fully supportive, seeing it as an opportunity to turn the regrettable incident into a catalyst for positive change. As word of Aisha's project spread, it caught the attention of local media. A reporter from the city's newspaper reached out for an interview, intrigued by the story of a woman turning a personal experience of discrimination into a community-wide movement. Aisha carefully considered how to frame her message. She wanted to be honest about what had happened, but she also didn't want to dwell on the negative. Her goal was to inspire action, not to shame or blame. "What happened to me in that cafe is just one small example of the kind of discrimination that occurs every day," she told the reporter. "But I believe that most people, when given the opportunity to learn and grow, will choose to do better. That's what this program is about, giving people that opportunity." As the interview concluded, the reporter asked Aisha what she would say to the staff at the cafe if she had the chance. Aisha paused for a moment before responding. "I would say that I don't hold any ill will towards them. We all have biases that we may not even be aware of. What matters is what we do once we become aware. I hope they'll take this as an opportunity for self-reflection and growth. And I hope they'll join us in working towards a more inclusive community. The article, published a few days later, struck a chord with many readers. Aisha's inbox was flooded with messages of support, as well as inquiries from people wanting to get involved in the program. As Aisha read through the responses, she felt a mix of emotions: hope for the future, determination to see this through, and a twinge of sadness for the circumstances that had made it necessary. But above all, she felt ready for the challenge ahead. This was just the beginning. A week after the incident, Aisha took a deep breath and pushed open the door to the cafe. The familiar chime announced her entrance, causing heads to turn. The atmosphere immediately tensed, recognition dawning on the faces of the staff. Megan, who had been restocking napkins, froze in place. Her heart raced as she watched Aisha confidently approach the counter. This time, a different server quickly stepped up to take Aisha's order, their demeanor overly polite, almost apologetic. As Aisha waited for her coffee, her eyes scanned the cafe, eventually landing on Megan. Instead of the anger or disdain Megan expected, Aisha's gaze held a mix of curiosity and determination. Gathering her courage, Aisha approached Megan, who instinctively took a step back. "Hello," Aisha said, her voice calm and measured. "I believe we have some unfinished business. I'm Aisha." Megan swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Megan. I'm sorry about what happened last time." Aisha nodded, acknowledging the apology without accepting it outright. "I appreciate that, Megan, but I'm not here for just an apology. I'm here to invite you to be part of something important." Confusion replaced fear on Megan's face. "Invite me? To what?" "I'm organizing a program," Aisha explained. "It's about understanding and overcoming racial biases. I think you could benefit from it, and maybe even contribute something valuable to the discussion." Megan's initial reaction was to refuse. The thought of facing her actions head-on, in a group setting no less, was terrifying. But as she looked into Aisha's eyes, she saw no judgment, only a genuine desire to create change. I don't know," Megan stammered. "I'm not sure I'd be welcome there." Aisha's expression softened. "That's exactly why you should come. This isn't about pointing fingers or shaming anyone. It's about learning and growing together." After a moment of internal struggle, Megan nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll come." Aisha smiled, handing Megan a flyer with the details of the first meeting. As she turned to leave, she paused. "Thank you, Megan. It takes courage to confront our own biases. I look forward to seeing you there." As Aisha exited the cafe, Megan stood rooted to the spot, the flyer clutched in her hand. A mix of emotions swirled within her: fear, shame, but also a glimmer of hope. The day of the first meeting arrived quicker than Megan anticipated. She stood outside the community center, nervously fidgeting with the strap of her bag. Several times, she almost turned back, but the memory of Aisha's sincere invitation kept her feet moving forward. Inside, the room was set up in a circle of chairs. Megan recognized a few faces from around town, including, to her surprise, some of her co-workers from the cafe. Aisha spotted her and waved her over to an empty seat. As the meeting began, Aisha introduced the program's goals and the format for their sessions. "We're here to share our experiences, listen to each other, and learn," she explained. "This is a safe space for honest conversation." The first activity was a simple icebreaker, asking participants to share a time when they felt like an outsider. As Megan listened to others' stories, she began to relax slightly. Everyone had experienced feeling different or excluded at some point. When it was her turn to speak, Megan took a deep breath. I'm here because I made a mistake," she began, her voice shaky. "I judged someone based on their race, and I'm ashamed of that." I want to understand why I did it and how to be better." Her honesty was met with nods of encouragement from the group. Aisha, in particular, gave her a warm smile. As the meeting progressed, participants shared personal stories of discrimination they had faced or witnessed. Megan found herself deeply moved by these accounts. She had always known racism existed, but hearing firsthand experiences made it real in a way statistics never had. One story in particular struck a chord with Megan. An older gentleman named James recounted how he, a respected physician, had been mistaken for a janitor at his own hospital multiple times. "It's not just about that one moment of mistaken identity," James explained. "It's the cumulative effect of these experiences over a lifetime. It wears you down, makes you question your place in the world." Megan felt a lump form in her throat as she realized the potential impact her actions at the cafe could have had on Aisha. It wasn't just about one ignored customer. It was about reinforcing a lifetime of similar experiences. As the meeting drew to a close, Megan felt emotionally drained, but also oddly lighter. She had taken the first step towards understanding and changing her own biases. Aisha approached her as people were leaving. "Thank you for coming, Megan. How are you feeling?" Megan considered the question carefully. "Overwhelmed," she admitted, "but also grateful, I guess, for the chance to learn and do better." Aisha nodded understandingly. "That's a good place to start. I hope we'll see you at the next meeting." As Megan walked home that evening, her mind buzzed with new perspectives and challenging questions. She knew she had a long way to go, but for the first time, she felt like she was on the right path. In the weeks that followed, Megan found herself increasingly invested in the program. Each meeting brought new insights and challenging conversations. She began to see the world through a different lens, noticing subtle instances of discrimination that she had previously overlooked. It was during one of these meetings that Megan met Jamal, a local artist whose work often focused on social issues. Jamal's passionate speeches and thought-provoking questions quickly made him a central figure in the group discussions. After one particularly intense session, Megan approached Jamal. "Your perspective on these issues is so clear," she said. "How did you become so aware?" Jamal smiled wryly. "Experience mostly, and a lot of hard conversations with myself and others." He paused, studying Megan's earnest expression. "You know, I'm working on a new series of paintings about identity and prejudice. If you're interested, you could stop by my studio sometime. I could use a fresh pair of eyes." Megan eagerly accepted the invitation, sensing an opportunity to deepen her understanding beyond the structured meetings. The following weekend, Megan found herself in Jamal's studio, a converted warehouse space filled with canvases in various stages of completion. As Jamal showed her around, explaining his creative process and the stories behind his art, Megan felt a growing sense of awe and discomfort. One painting in particular caught her attention. It depicted a young black man, his face a mix of frustration and resignation, surrounded by a sea of white hands pointing accusingly. "This one," Jamal said, noticing her gaze, "is about the constant scrutiny and judgment many of us face daily. The assumption of guilt before innocence." Megan swallowed hard, remembering her own assumptions about Aisha in the cafe. "It's powerful," she said softly, "and painful to look at." Jamal nodded. "Art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. At least, that's what I believe." As they continued to talk, Jamal shared more of his personal experiences with racism. He told her about being followed in stores, about job interviews that suddenly became unavailable when he showed up in person, about the constant need to prove himself worthy in spaces where others were automatically accepted. "It's exhausting," he admitted. "Always being on guard, always having to represent your entire race in every interaction." Megan listened, her heart heavy. I never realized I mean, I knew racism existed, but I didn't understand how it affected every aspect of life. Jamal's expression softened. That's why conversations like this are so important. It's easy to dismiss racism when you don't see its daily impact. As the afternoon wore on, their conversation shifted to Megan's own journey of self-discovery. She confessed her lingering guilt over the incident with Aisha and her struggle to confront her own biases. You know, Jamal said thoughtfully, guilt can be a starting point, but it shouldn't be the end goal. The question is, what are you going to do with that feeling? His words struck a chord with Megan. She had been so focused on feeling bad about her past actions that she hadn't fully considered how to move forward. I want to do something, she said, surprising herself with her vehemence. I want to make a difference, but I don't know how. Jamal smiled. That's a good start. And you know, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply share our own story of growth. Your journey from that day in the cafe to now, that's a story that could resonate with a lot of people. As Megan left the studio that day, her mind was buzzing with new ideas and perspectives. She felt a growing urge to express her emotions and experiences, but wasn't sure how. That night, unable to sleep, Megan found herself reaching for her neglected guitar. As her fingers moved over the strings, a melody began to form. Words followed, hesitant at first, then flowing more freely. She sang about blindness and awakening, about the pain of recognizing one's own prejudices and the hope for change. The song was raw and imperfect, but it felt true. As the last notes faded, Megan realized she was crying. But these weren't tears of shame or guilt. They were tears of release, of a burden beginning to lift. Over the next few weeks, Megan threw herself into her music with renewed passion. She wrote song after song, each one exploring different aspects of her journey and the stories she had heard in the program. Her coworkers at the cafe noticed the change in her. Gone was the uncertain, easily influenced girl who had ignored Aisha. In her place was a more confident, thoughtful young woman who wasn't afraid to speak up when she heard a prejudiced comment. One day, as she was humming one of her new songs while wiping down tables, her manager approached her. You know, he said, we've been thinking about having live music here on weekends. Would you be interested in performing? Megan's heart raced at the opportunity. It was a chance to share her music, her message, with a wider audience. But it also meant making herself vulnerable, opening up about her past mistakes and her ongoing journey. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. Yes, she said firmly. I'd like that very much. As she resumed her work, Megan felt a sense of purpose settling over her. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was on the right path. Her music would be her way of contributing to the conversation, of helping others understand and grow as she had. With each chord she strummed and each lyric she wrote, Megan was not just finding her voice as an artist, but as a human being committed to positive change. As the weeks passed, Megan's involvement in the community program deepened. She found herself looking forward to each meeting, eager to learn and contribute. The group had become a safe space where she could explore difficult topics and challenge her own assumptions. During one particularly powerful session, the facilitator asked participants to share a personal story of growth or realization related to racial issues. As others shared their experiences, Megan felt a growing urge to speak up. Her heart raced as she raised her hand. I'd like to share something, Megan said, her voice quavering slightly. All eyes turned to her, including Aisha's, who gave her an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Megan began, A few months ago, I was the person who ignored Aisha in the cafe. A collective gasp went through the room, and Megan felt her cheeks flush with shame, but she pressed on. I've spent a lot of time thinking about why I did what I did. It wasn't just peer pressure. It was years of unchallenged assumptions and stereotypes that I'd never really examined. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. Being part of this group has opened my eyes. I've learned so much about the daily realities of racism, about my own privilege, and about the power we all have to make a difference. Megan went on to describe her journey over the past few months, the conversations with Jamal, the soul-searching, and how she'd been using her music to process her emotions and spread awareness. I'm not proud of who I was that day in the cafe, she concluded, but I'm working hard to become someone I can be proud of, someone who stands up against racism instead of perpetuating it. As Megan finished speaking, the room fell silent. She held her breath, afraid to look up and see judgment in the eyes of the group members. But then, slowly, applause began to build. She raised her head to see faces filled with empathy and respect. Aisha stood up and walked over to Megan, enveloping her in a warm hug. "Thank you for your honesty," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your story is exactly why we're doing this work. It shows that change is possible." The facilitator thanked Megan for her bravery in sharing her story and opened the floor for discussion. What followed was a powerful conversation about personal growth, the courage it takes to confront one's own biases, and the importance of creating spaces for such transformations. As the meeting drew to a close, several group members approached Megan to express their appreciation for her candor. Many shared that her story had inspired them to reflect more deeply on their own attitudes and behaviors. Jamal, who had been quietly observing, came up to Megan with a broad smile. "You did good, kid," he said, giving her a playful punch on the shoulder. That took guts. Megan felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The secret she'd been carrying, the shame of her past action, was now out in the open. Instead of the condemnation she'd feared, she'd been met with understanding and support. As she was gathering her things to leave, Aisha approached her again. "Megan, I've been thinking. The story you shared today, it's powerful. I believe it could really resonate with a lot of people, especially those who might be resistant to conversations about race." Megan nodded, intrigued. "What are you suggesting?" "Well," Aisha continued, "we've been looking for ways to expand our outreach. Would you be willing to share your story more publicly, perhaps at some of our larger events or even with local media?" The thought of speaking about her experience to a wider audience was daunting, but Megan could see the potential impact. If her story could help others recognize and confront their own biases, wasn't that worth the discomfort? "I think I'd like that," Megan said slowly. "It's scary, but if it can help, I want to do it." Aisha beamed at her. "That's wonderful, Megan. Your courage in confronting your past actions and your commitment to growth, that's a powerful message. It shows that change is possible, that we can all learn and do better." As Megan left the community center that evening, she felt a mix of emotions, nervousness about the prospect of sharing her story more widely, but also a sense of purpose and hope. She realized that by openly acknowledging her past mistake and her journey towards change, she wasn't just transforming herself, she was potentially helping others begin their own journeys of self-reflection and growth. That night, inspired by the day's events, Megan picked up her guitar and began to compose a new song. The lyrics spoke of transformation, of bridges being built between people, of the power of honest conversations to change hearts and minds. As she played, Megan felt a growing sense of resolve. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be difficult conversations, moments of doubt, and probably some pushback, but she also knew that she was no longer alone on this journey. She had found a community of support, and together, they were working towards a more understanding and equitable world. With each chord she strummed and each word she sang, Megan recommitted herself to this path of growth and change. Her music, once just a dream of stardom, had become a tool for social change, a way to touch hearts, open minds, and maybe, just maybe, make the world a little bit better. In the following days, Megan and Aisha began to work closely together, planning how to share Megan's story more broadly. They decided to organize a fundraising event that would combine music, personal narratives, and community dialogue about racial issues. "We could host it at the cafe," Megan suggested during one of their planning sessions. "It's where this all started, and it would show how much things have changed." Aisha nodded enthusiastically. "That's a great idea. It would be symbolic of the transformation we're trying to encourage in the community." As they dove into the logistics of organizing the event, Megan felt a growing excitement. This was a chance to use her music for something meaningful, to contribute to a cause larger than herself. However, not everyone was as supportive of the idea. When Megan shared their plans with her co-workers at the cafe, she was met with mixed reactions. Some were encouraging, but others were visibly uncomfortable. "Do we really need to make such a big deal out of this?" one of her colleagues, Tom, asked with a frown. "Can't we just move on and forget about what happened?" Megan took a deep breath, reminding herself of the conversations she'd had in the community program. "Moving on without addressing the issue doesn't solve anything," she explained patiently. "This event isn't about dwelling on the past. It's about learning from it and creating positive change for the future." Despite her explanation, she could see that Tom and a few others remained skeptical. Their resistance was a stark reminder that not everyone in the community was as open to these discussions as those in the program. Undeterred, Megan and Aisha pressed on with their plans. They reached out to local musicians, activists, and community leaders, inviting them to participate in the event. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many people eager to contribute their talents and perspectives. As the day of the event approached, Megan found herself facing a new challenge. She had been working on a song specifically for this occasion, one that encapsulated her journey and the lessons she'd learned. But as she rehearsed, she found herself plagued by doubt. "What if they don't like it?" she confided in Jamal during one of their now regular meetups. "What if they think I'm trying to make myself look good, or that I'm not sincere?" Jamal listened patiently, then said, "Megan, your sincerity is what makes your story powerful. You're not claiming to be perfect. You're showing that growth is possible. That's what people need to hear." His words bolstered her confidence, but the nerves remained as the big day arrived. The cafe had been transformed for the event, with a small stage set up in one corner and the tables rearranged to create an intimate atmosphere. As people began to file in, Megan peeked out from the back room, her heart racing. She saw familiar faces from the community program, curious locals who had seen the flyers, and even a few reporters from local media outlets. Aisha was at the door, warmly greeting everyone who entered. The event began with Aisha giving a brief introduction, explaining the purpose of the gathering and the journey that had led to this moment. Then, it was Megan's turn to take the stage. As she stepped up to the microphone, guitar in hand, Megan scanned the crowd. She saw Jamal giving her a thumbs up, Aisha smiling encouragingly, and even Tom, looking somewhat uncomfortable, but present nonetheless. "Hi everyone," Megan began, her voice slightly shaky. "A few months ago, I did something I'm not proud of in this very cafe. Today, I want to share with you the story of what happened after that day and the journey it set me on." As Megan spoke, weaving her narrative with the songs she had written, she could feel the atmosphere in the room changing. People leaned in, listening intently. She saw nods of recognition, eyes widening in understanding, and even a few tears. When she finished her set, the applause was thunderous. But more importantly, she could see that her words and music had sparked something. As the event transitioned into an open dialogue, people began to share their own experiences, asking questions and engaging in the kind of honest, sometimes uncomfortable conversations that lead to real change. As the evening wound down, Megan found herself surrounded by people wanting to talk, to share their thoughts, to ask how they could get involved. Even Tom approached her, looking thoughtful. "I didn't really get it before," he admitted. "But listening to you tonight, it made me think about some things I've never considered before. Thanks for that." Megan felt a wave of emotion wash over her. This event, this moment, was more than she could have ever imagined when she first started this journey. She caught Aisha's eye across the room, and they shared a smile of triumph and hope. As the last of the attendees left, Megan helped clean up the cafe, her mind buzzing with the conversations she'd had and the connections that had been made. She realized that this event wasn't an endpoint, but rather a beginning. It was a step towards creating a more understanding, empathetic community. Aisha approached her as she was putting away the last of the chairs. "You did it, Megan," she said, pulling her into a hug. "You turned a moment of prejudice into a catalyst for change. I'm so proud of you." Megan hugged her back, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. "We did it," she corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, without the program, without everyone who supported us." As they locked up the cafe and stepped out into the cool night air, Megan felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that there was still much work to be done, many more conversations to be had, and challenges to face. But she also knew that she was no longer alone in this journey. She was part of a community committed to growth, understanding, and positive change. With her guitar slung over her shoulder and a heart full of hope, Megan walked home, already thinking about the next steps in their ongoing mission to build a more inclusive and empathetic world. In the days following the event at the cafe, Megan and Aisha found themselves at the center of a growing movement. The local newspaper ran a feature article about their initiative, praising their innovative approach to addressing racial issues through personal storytelling and music. The publicity brought both opportunities and challenges. Requests poured in from schools, community centers, and even neighboring towns, all eager to host similar events. While exciting, the sudden attention was also overwhelming. "I never expected it to blow up like this," Megan confessed to Aisha during one of their planning sessions. "It's amazing, but I'm just a waitress who writes songs. What do I know about leading a movement?" Aisha smiled reassuringly. "You're much more than that, Megan. You're someone who had the courage to confront your own biases and share that journey openly. That's powerful. But I understand how you feel. We're in uncharted territory here." They decided to start small, focusing on organizing events within their immediate community before expanding outward. They also reached out to other members of their original group, inviting them to share their stories and perspectives alongside Megan's. As they planned their next event, Megan threw herself into writing new material. Her music had evolved, becoming more nuanced as she explored complex themes of identity, privilege, and social change. She found herself collaborating with other local musicians, including some she met through Jamal, creating a diverse sound that reflected the multicultural nature of their message. The day of their second major event arrived, this time held in the auditorium of a local high school. The space was packed, with students, teachers, parents, and community members filling every seat. The program began with Aisha introducing the initiative and its goals. Then, one by one, members of their group took the stage to share their experiences. There was James, the doctor who spoke about the subtle racism he encountered in his profession. Maria, a Latina business owner who detailed her struggles with stereotypes, and others, each story unique, yet connected by threads of shared experiences and hopes for change. When it was Megan's turn, she felt a familiar flutter of nerves, but also a growing confidence. She began with her story, now well-practiced but no less sincere, before transitioning into her music. As she played her newest song, a powerful ballad about breaking down walls and building bridges, she noticed something remarkable happening in the audience. People were joining hands, swaying to the music, some with tears in their eyes. The energy in the room was palpable, a mix of sorrow for past injustices and hope for a better future. After the performances, the event transitioned into breakout sessions where attendees could engage in deeper discussions about the issues raised. Megan found herself surrounded by high school students eager to share their own experiences and ask questions. One student, a shy girl named Zoe, approached Megan after the session. "Your story, it made me think about things I've done, assumptions I've made," she said hesitantly. How do you start to change?" Megan felt a surge of empathy for the girl, remembering her own journey. "It starts with being willing to question yourself," she replied gently, "to listen to others' experiences and really hear them. It's not always easy, but it's so important." As the event wound down, Megan and Aisha found themselves surrounded by people wanting to get involved, offering support, and sharing their own ideas for promoting inclusivity in the community. "We've started something big here," Aisha said, her eyes shining with excitement. "Something that could really make a difference." Megan nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. "It's incredible, but also a little scary. Where do we go from here?" That question was answered sooner than they expected. As they were packing up, they were approached by a woman who introduced herself as a representative from the mayor's office. "The mayor has been following your initiative with great interest," she said. "He'd like to meet with you to discuss how the city can support and expand your efforts." Megan and Aisha exchanged surprised looks. This was an opportunity they hadn't anticipated, a chance to affect change on a broader scale. As they left the school, the warm evening air filled with the chatter of people still discussing the event, Megan felt a profound sense of purpose. She thought back to that day in the cafe, how a moment of prejudice had set her on this unexpected path. "You know," she said to Aisha as they walked, "when I first started this journey, I thought it was about making up for a mistake. But it's become so much more than that." Aisha nodded, understanding. "It's about creating a community where those mistakes become less and less common, where understanding and empathy are the norm, not the exception." Megan smiled, strumming a chord on her guitar as they walked. "Exactly, and we're just getting started." As they parted ways for the evening, both women felt a renewed sense of determination. They had seen firsthand the impact of their work, the conversations it was sparking, the changes it was inspiring. There were challenges ahead, no doubt, but also incredible possibilities. With every story shared, every song sung, and every honest conversation had, they were moving their community toward a more inclusive, understanding future. And for Megan, who had once been paralyzed by shame over her actions, this journey had become a source of pride and purpose, a way to turn a moment of ignorance into a lifetime of positive action. The meeting with the mayor proved to be a turning point for Megan and Aisha's initiative. Mayor Thompson, a progressive leader known for his commitment to community development, was enthusiastic about their work. "What you've started here is exactly what our city needs," he said, leaning forward in his chair. "We want to support you in expanding this program. How can we help?" Over the next hour, they discussed various possibilities: funding for more events, integrating their program into school curricula, and even the potential for a citywide awareness campaign. As they left City Hall, Megan felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. "This is huge, Aisha. Are we ready for this level of responsibility?" Aisha squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We'll learn as we go. Remember, we're not alone in this." True to her words, their support network continued to grow. Local businesses offered sponsorships, volunteers stepped forward to help organize events, and more people came forward wanting to share their stories. One particularly exciting development came when a local news station reached out, interested in doing a feature on their initiative. The producer, a woman named Sandra, was particularly intrigued by Megan's personal journey. "Your story is compelling," Sandra explained during their pre-interview meeting. "A young white woman confronting her own biases and using music to promote change. It's the kind of narrative that could really resonate with viewers." The day of the interview arrived, and Megan found herself in front of the cameras, with Aisha by her side for moral support. As the interviewer asked her to recount her experience, Megan took a deep breath and began her story. She spoke candidly about that day in the cafe, not shying away from the ugliness of her actions. But she also shared her journey of growth, the lessons she'd learned, and the changes she'd seen in herself and others through their initiative. "It's not about feeling guilty," she explained, her voice steady. "It's about recognizing our biases, confronting them, and actively working to be better. And it's about creating spaces where we can have these difficult conversations openly and honestly." When asked to perform one of her songs, Megan chose her latest composition, a powerful piece about the strength found in diversity and the beauty of a community united. As she sang, she could see the camera crew nodding along, visibly moved. After the interview, Sandra approached them, her eyes shining. "This is going to make a fantastic piece," she said. "I think your message is really going to touch people." The impact of the television feature exceeded their expectations. In the days following the broadcast, their initiative's social media accounts were flooded with messages of support and inquiries about how to get involved. People from neighboring cities reached out, asking how they could start similar programs in their own communities. Amidst the whirlwind of activity, Megan received an unexpected call. It was from a record producer who had seen the interview. "Your music is powerful, Megan," he said, "and the message behind it is important. We'd like to talk to you about potentially recording an album." The offer was tempting, a chance to reach an even wider audience with her music and message. But it also presented a dilemma. Would pursuing a music career take her away from the grassroots work she'd been doing with Aisha? As she grappled with this decision, Megan found herself back at Jamal's studio, seeking his advice. "This could be a great opportunity," Jamal mused, studying one of his paintings. "Music has always been a powerful tool for social change. Think about the civil rights movement or the anti-war protests of the 60s. Your songs could reach people who might never come to one of your events." Megan nodded, considering his words. "But I don't want to lose touch with the community work we've been doing. That direct connection with people, those conversations, they're so important." Jamal turned to her, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Who says you have to choose? Maybe this is a chance to bridge both worlds. Use your music to spread the message, and use your platform to continue the work you've been doing with Aisha." As Megan left the studio, she felt a sense of clarity. She realized that this opportunity, like everything else in her journey so far, was a chance to expand her impact, not limit it. She called Aisha and shared the news, along with her thoughts on how to move forward. Aisha was thrilled for her. "This is amazing, Megan," she exclaimed. "And I think you're right. We can use this to amplify our message. Your music could open doors that might otherwise remain closed." Over the next few weeks, Megan threw herself into preparations for her album, while still remaining actively involved in their community initiatives. She worked with the producer to ensure that her message of unity and understanding remained at the forefront of her music. As she stood in the recording studio, laying down tracks for her debut album, Megan felt a profound sense of purpose. She thought about how far she'd come from that day in the cafe, from a moment of ignorance to becoming a voice for change. Her journey was far from over, but with each note she sang and each story she shared, Megan knew she was contributing to a larger narrative of growth, understanding, and hope for a more inclusive future. As Megan's music career began to take off and the community initiative continued to grow, not everyone was pleased with the changes happening in their town. Tom, Megan's former co-worker at the cafe who had initially been skeptical of the program, had become increasingly resentful of the attention Megan was receiving. One evening, as Megan was preparing for a small concert at the cafe, Tom approached her with a forced smile. "Hey Megan, big night tonight, huh?" Megan nodded, sensing an undercurrent of tension in his voice. "Yeah, it should be great. Are you coming to watch?" Tom's smile faltered. "Nah, I've got other plans. Besides, I'm getting a bit tired of all this stuff." He gestured vaguely around the cafe, which was decorated with posters promoting unity and understanding. Megan frowned, concerned by his attitude. "Tom, is everything okay? You know you can talk to me if something's bothering you." Tom's facade cracked, revealing the anger beneath. "You want to know what's bothering me? This whole thing is a sham. You made one mistake, and now you're acting like you're some kind of savior. It's ridiculous." His outburst caught the attention of others in the cafe, including Aisha, who had just arrived. She approached cautiously, sensing the tension. "Tom?" Megan began, trying to keep her voice calm. "This isn't about me being a savior. It's about learning from mistakes and trying to create positive change." But Tom wasn't listening. His voice rose as he continued. "You know what? I'm sick of feeling guilty for being white. I'm sick of having to watch every word I say. This whole thing has gone too far." As he stormed out of the cafe, Megan and Aisha exchanged worried glances. They had encountered resistance before, but this level of anger was new. "I'll talk to him," Aisha said softly. "Sometimes people lash out when they're feeling threatened or uncomfortable. He might just need someone to listen." Megan nodded, but couldn't shake the uneasy feeling as she prepared for her performance. The concert went well, with the cafe packed with supporters. However, as Megan was packing up her guitar afterwards, she noticed something was off. Her notebook, where she kept her song lyrics and ideas for the initiative, was missing. A sick feeling settled in her stomach as she realized what might have happened. She quickly found Aisha and explained the situation. "Do you think Tom might have taken it?" Aisha asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Before Megan could respond, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an alert for a new social media post. Someone had created a page mocking their initiative, using out-of-context quotes from Megan's notebook to paint her as insincere and hypocritical. Megan's heart sank as she scrolled through the comments, seeing how quickly negativity was spreading. "What do we do?" she asked Aisha, her voice trembling. Aisha took a deep breath, her eyes reflecting a mix of determination and compassion. "We face this head-on. We've always been about honest conversations. This is just another opportunity for dialogue." Over the next few days, Megan and Aisha worked tirelessly to address the situation. They reached out to Tom, not with anger, but with an invitation to talk. They organized an open forum where people could express their concerns and frustrations about the initiative. The forum was tense at first, with some attendees echoing Tom's sentiments about feeling blamed or excluded. But as the conversation progressed, something remarkable happened. People began to really listen to each other, to share their fears and hopes openly. Megan stood up and addressed the group. "I'm not perfect," she said, her voice steady. "I'm still learning, still growing. This initiative isn't about blame or guilt. It's about understanding each other better, about creating a community where everyone feels valued and heard." As the evening wore on, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. Even Tom, who had reluctantly attended, seemed to soften as he listened to others' experiences. After the forum, Tom approached Megan and Aisha. I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I was scared. I felt like I was being pushed aside, but I see now that wasn't your intention." Megan felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you, Tom. And I'm sorry too if we ever made you feel excluded. Your voice matters in this conversation too." In the aftermath of this challenge, Megan and Aisha realized they had learned a valuable lesson. They needed to ensure their initiative was truly inclusive, addressing the fears and concerns of all community members. They began incorporating more diverse voices into their programs, creating spaces for people to express their anxieties without judgment, and focusing on building bridges of understanding between all segments of the community. Megan's music evolved too, with her newest songs exploring themes of forgiveness, growth, and the complex emotions that come with confronting one's own biases. As she stood on stage at her album release party months later, Megan looked out at the diverse crowd. She saw Aisha beaming proudly, Jamal giving her a thumbs up, and even Tom nodding along to the music. "This song is for all of us," Megan said into the microphone. "For every mistake we've made, every hard conversation we've had, and every step we've taken together towards understanding. We're not perfect, but we're trying. And that's what matters." As the first chords rang out, Megan felt a profound sense of gratitude. What had started as a moment of shame in a cafe had led to this, a community coming together, facing its challenges head-on, and growing stronger in the process. The journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more difficult conversations, more growth ahead. But as Megan sang her heart out, she knew that they were on the right path, a path of empathy, understanding, and hope for a better future.